Okay, hey folks, let's see if this is happening again. I really hope not.
Folks. Okay, hi everybody. Hello, folks. My name is Mark.
Shit. Alright, hang on. Is it still, giving me funky audio? I really hope it isn't. Let's see. Damn it. Please don't,
Still,
okay.
giving me funky.
Alright, cool. Weird audio is gone. So I've got a problem with my audio. Right? So as you can tell, I'm still trying to figure that out. The main reason why I need to is because I can't like, play a video and hear it at the same time as like I'm commenting on it. Which kind of fucks up my plan because I was gonna watch a couple of videos here. But you know what? I think I'll just link to them and then like you guys can watch them if you want. And I'll just have to figure out what the hell's going on with my setup. Probably do some test streams or whatever. So yeah, let me just, sorry about that. I know that there were some people watching, and whoever you were that was watching, please come back. So yeah, let's get on with the show here. So, and once again, sorry about that. What can I say? It's a learning experience. So yeah, let's get going here. Thank you. Looks like we do have a couple of viewers here. Thank you, whoever you are, for watching. And we have a lot to talk about today, which is gonna screw me up because I can't play the videos that I wanted to play, which is kind of crappy. And I gotta figure out why my shit is all screwed up like that. But before we go on, we are starting a new piece today because I finished the thing with the dragons, and I'm planning on coloring that, in Photoshop as soon as I get all that set up back here. I think I'm just gonna like buy Photoshop again. I had a copy of Photoshop and I can't find it, which is all right because the copy I had was like 13 years old anyway. So I'm thinking I might as well just take the leap and actually pay for the subscription service and get it all installed and all that shit, because I want to be able to stream while I'm photoshopping things. But until we do that, we're going to start a new piece, and we're going to do it on this. We're going to draw something, and we're going to draw it on this really old, stained, messed up piece of paper that I've got right here, which is all nasty because I found this like piece of like cardstock in my closet. This has probably been back there for like 20 years, so we're just going to draw something on it. You see it's got like fucking like yellowing on it and all that, but who cares? I don't care. We're going to draw something good. And besides the fact that if we just scan it in, you can get rid of all that shit anyway. So, let's see. What should we actually draw? Let's draw something gross and disgusting, because 2020 is coming to an end, and 2020 is a gross and disgusting year with lots of horrible things that happened. And let's see. So the first thing I want to talk about is Elliot Page and why all the conservatives are losing their minds over Elliot Page. And I was going to play a video of Louder with Crowder talking about Elliot Page, but since my audio is jacked up, you all now get to be spared that video. Suffice to say that he was, being a disgusting asshole about it, as well as, I had another one by Ben Shapiro, who is just losing his mind, can't wrap around his puny little brain the fact that someone is trans, can't understand the idea of trans people. So, so those of you who aren't aware, Elliot Page is formerly known as Ellen Page. Sorry for the dead naming there, but, have to report the facts, right? And as a woman, she was in various things, except, you know, Inception and stuff like that. And now as a man is continuing on with his acting career. Right. And a lot of people can't handle the fact that, you know, a successful person like this would be trans in the first place. A lot of people can't seem to handle that. A lot of conservatives really get very triggered and, you know, they get really triggered over the fact of trans people even existing. And people like, you know, Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro. And I think really what it is that it really tends to threaten their masculinity a lot. Right. A male to female trans person threatens their masculinity, especially when it's someone who's successful, who is a male to female trans person, tends to threaten their masculinity in obvious ways, because it's like, okay, well, you know, I mean, how much more threatening can you get than, you know, what's more emasculating than chopping off one's, you know, member, right? And the idea that somebody can do it and be of sound mind really just drives conservative people like, you know, Ben Shapiro up the wall. And they have to rationalize it. They can't wrap their heads around the fact that, like, a normal functioning person with making rational decisions would do something like that. And they don't understand it, and all they can really do is attack. And that's really the definition of bigotry right there. Right. That's really what bigotry means. When you can't understand something to the point where you feel aggressive towards it. Right. You know, that's transphobia. So you hear often people talk about things like, you know, transphobia, and you know, they'll say things like, you know, I'm not afraid of them, so why do they call it transphobia, right? Or, you know, or even like, you know, homophobia. Like, they'll say things like, you'll hear this from conservatives a lot. They'll say like, well, the word homophobia is misleading because I'm not afraid of gay people, right? And because they think the word phobia is like, well, I'm afraid of spiders or some shit. Like, that's what they think about the word phobia, you know? It's like fear of heights or fear of spiders or fear of, you know, whatever, open places or something like that. And they're thinking like homophobia is a phobia in the same way that is. And it's like, no. Homophobia, transphobia, what that really means is that you're afraid, like, the existence of these people challenges your worldview. And instead of expanding your worldview, what you end up doing is lashing out against these people because you can't handle the fact that your worldview is being challenged. That's what it really means, you know. And so you see, like, there's a big video there that I had that I was gonna put where, you know, it was like basically Ben Shapiro just losing his mind over the fact that a successful actor, you know, a successful Hollywood mainstream actor who is probably rich by this point, definitely well off, and has been in some, you know, major summer blockbusters, would decide to come out as trans. And it's like, it's really because it's like, well, why would anybody care, you know? When you heard that news, I don't know if you heard that news about Elliot Page, did it really matter to you as a person? That's what I'm wondering. Like, is anybody watching this did they really care or think about, you know, Elliot Page transitioning in the slightest? Was there anything about that stood out to you that made you, you know, I guess, need to even comment about it, like on social media, on Twitter, or anything like that? Not really, you know. I don't think so. Not me, right? And it's because, you know, why do people decide to, like, you know, because you saw like a lot of conservative people on social media and stuff, like, you know, dead naming Elliot Page, that kind of thing. Why would they even bother to do that in the first place, right? You know, that's why. That's really what transphobia means. It's like, okay, there's a random person out there in the world that doesn't really affect you at all, right? Nothing that Elliot Page does is going to affect your life in any given way. You know, not really, right? Nothing that he does, nothing that he says is going to affect your life. I mean, he's not a politician. He's not making rules that affect the lives of millions of people like a president or a senator. He's not passing laws. He's not starting wars. He's not doing anything like that. He's acting in movies that you can choose to see or not see, right? So why would it matter so much whatever he wants to do with his life, right? Whether it's, you know, whatever it is, you know, why should it fucking matter that much to anybody, right? And the fact that somebody like who has a platform like Ben Shapiro would, or, you know, Louder with Crowder, you know, Steven Crowder, right? Steven Crowder devoted like an hour to this shit on his show, right? Why would, you know, why does this incite him so much that he has to go out and devote, you know, 60 minutes of his life talking about it? You know, and that's, I don't know, it kind of goes back to like what I was saying like in the last stream about how these guys really don't have anything that they can like, that they can, you know, display as a win over the last 4 years. They really don't. They don't, you know, like conservative pundits, you know, they don't really have very much that they can show as an example of how a conservative policy has actually helped the country during the Trump era. Not very much at all. You know, we currently right now, you know, the United States is in a pretty bad position, right? And right now in this country, the economy is in the frickin' toilet right now. You know, we've got, you know, millions upon millions of people in, you know, a very bad position, you know, economically wise, right? Lots of people on government assistance, right? Jobs are just fucking like, you know, in the frickin' toilet, you know, and this is because of the pandemic, but a lot of this happened before the pandemic, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that later. You know, the economy really wasn't that good before, you know, pre-pandemic. Not really, you know. And, you know, you'll point to things like the stock market and all that, and how it was going up and all of these things, right? It's like, well, the stock market is making record gains right now also, but it's making record gains while 20 million people are you know, on unemployment. And it's like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that it should be so high while so many people are not working, right? And it's because it's being artificially propped up, you know. And it was somewhat artificially propped up even before COVID-19, right? Maybe that's kind of nails home the point that the stock market isn't a good economic indicator for the lower 99%. You know, not really, right? I mean, the economy's great right now if you're fucking, you know, Amazon, right? And you're like, or if you own fucking Uber Eats or Grubhub or something, right? If you have a giant corporation that you can afford to do things like curbside pickup, you know, and that kind of thing, or if you run a bank or whatever, like if you're a super rich and important executive or something like this, right? And you're able to adapt to this and make a boatload of money, and also you're getting, you know, PPE loans from the government and stuff to keep your, like, you know, basically free money to keep your business afloat, but you were already making money in the first place, right? Then yeah, then it's fantastic. Then you're doing fantastic, right? But the average person out there right now not doing so good, 20 million people out of work, right? The unemployment claims went down slightly in, the last couple of months because people stopped looking for work. Not because people got jobs, right? They basically stopped looking for work. They just, because it's like, and I can understand that shit. I mean, I was actually out of work for half of this year myself, right? I mean, so this is like some shit. I mean, trust me, man. I went through this myself firsthand. I mean, I never gave up looking, but I understand the, how one can get depressed over that. So yeah, man. Getting back to how this relates to Elliot Page and just conservatives in general, they're harping on this stuff, on these types of culture war items, I guess. Culture war, subjects, because they don't really have anything else. So, there was a big thing last month, like, they're talking about Thanksgiving, right? And all this stuff. And, fucking Charlie Kirk. We went over last stream about Charlie Kirk and how he had this ridiculous, idiotic Thanksgiving rant, right? And now you're seeing them coming out against Elliot Page. And, also be prepared for them to jump on board early for the war on Christmas. That's going to be a big thing this Christmas too. And it's like, well, they're talking about this kind of shit because everything else that actually really affects everyone's lives, it's just been demonstrably, it's been shown over the last 4 years that if we go with the conservative policy on everything from jobs to the environment to healthcare and the pandemic response, that it's just one big utter fucking failure. Right? I mean, we're getting close now, speaking about the pandemic, we're getting close now to, I think it was something like 2,700 people died just yesterday from the pandemic, right? So we're back up to where we were when the shit first hit, back in March and in February, March, April, when it was at its height, right? And it was hitting like the blue states really hard, and we had almost 3,000 people a month dying from it. We're back to there, So basically we went this entire year and nothing got done, Other countries aren't having this problem, New Zealand, Japan, Australia. It's like gone down there. Australia had like 2 new cases for like, basically an entire month or some shit per day, right? 2 cases a day. And then there's actually been a couple of days in a row in Australia and in New Zealand where no new cases, 0 new cases, and no one's died from it, right? Life is basically returned to normal down there, So if you want to walk around without a mask on, if you want to go to the movies and go get sushi and like all of that shit, move to Australia, all right? Because they fucking like knew how to, and Japan and all that. And what do these guys have that we don't have? How come they're able to control, right? Control this outbreak? The United States wasn't. It's because of their leadership. It's because they had effective top-down leadership with intelligent people who listen to scientists, right? And, a populace that isn't, like, consumed by idiotic conspiracy theories, where half of the fucking population is not, like, part of some ridiculous, like, cult, and they actually listen to scientists, and they're not, like, fucking programmed by an alternative conservative media sphere into believing ridiculous, untrue bullshit. Right? That's what happens when you actually get people who are educated and an informed populace. They're able to rise to the challenge and effectively defend their populations from, dying of an easily preventable disease. Well, we can't even do that shit in America anymore. And the reason we can't do it is because of people like Ben Shapiro. Right? That's what it is, you know, because people like Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk, you know, and Sean Hannity and all these other fucking morons make too much money convincing people out there that it's like a part of some communist fucking plot to wear a mask and, you know, all of this shit. Right, to like stop a disease. It's part of some like crazy communist fucking infiltration to like, you know, make all of your kids like gay and ultimately, you know, sterilize the white male population or some shit to make, you know, so then all the frogs turn gay and then Jesus will come back and finally make it okay to open carry in schools or something. Like, seriously, you know, these, because we have too many people that make money doing this shit. Hang on one second, folks. I need to do something real quick. And what I need to do is put some paper underneath this paper. Because I need to kind of stabilize that a little. Because I noticed that the pencil's pushing through it too much. And my tabletop here is actually covered in leather, so it's not very hard. So I'm not able... there we go. See, now I'm able to get it a little bit darker. Very nice, very nice. Anyway, so yeah, you know, I think this is how it's going to go during the Biden presidency now, right? You know, as Biden and his administration try to enact pretty much anything, you know, any kind of legislation, anything like that, you'll see from the right wing in this country, you're not going to see any sort of like competing examples of how the legislation should actually be from a conservative standpoint or anything like that. You're not going to see anything like that because we already tried all of their shit and it doesn't work. So if you guys remember back during Obama and even the Clinton years, you know, you would at least get competing ideas from the right wing, right? So you would say, like, for example, when Hillary Clinton, right, in the 90s, tried to tackle healthcare in this country. It was the very first, like, attempt to get some kind of healthcare program going, you know, some kind of expansion of Medicare, right, back in the 90s, and it didn't work out. It got blocked, essentially, right? Well, but we did get competing suggestions, competing ideas from the Republicans at that time. So what Hillary Clinton was going for was basically a watered-down version of Medicare for all, you know. Wouldn't have been the same kind of Medicare for all that people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders are trying to get through. But it basically was something like that. And, you know, of course, the Republicans lost their minds and they blocked it. They prevented this from happening, right? And their alternative was a healthcare mandate, which ultimately became Romney Care, right? And the basis for Romney Care, which was, you know, Governor Romney instituted that. Right. Fast forward some years, you know, go through Bush's, you know, administration, blah, 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 blah. And Bush doesn't do shit for healthcare, by the way, for 8 years. Just, you know, keep that in mind. I mean, there was like Medicare Part D, which basically, you know, stripped off all of the seniors, right, all of the healthy people out and made them buy their own fucking healthcare. That's the Republican, you know, contribution to Medicare there. You know, go buy your own shit. Anyway, then we get into the Obama years, right? Obama picks up healthcare again and formulates what eventually becomes the ACA, right? And what they do is they take Romney Care, you know, which was the version of you know, the healthcare mandate that was originally it was originally proposed by the Cato Institute, you know? Sorry, no, not the Cato Institute. It was originally proposed by the Heritage Foundation, right? Hey, Booyah Amadon, how's it going? Thank you for coming back, by the way. Let me know if my sound gets funky, by the way. So go ahead and make any comments you want, and I'm going to read them at the end of the stream. So thank you, Booyah, for joining back in again. Appreciate it. Anyway, so this is what happened, right? So basically, the Obama people decide, okay, we really, really want some Republican buy-in on this, right? And they bent over backwards like crazy in order to get the Republicans to sign in, to basically buy into the ACA, right? Even, going so far as to strip out the public option. That was the one thing that Obama really wanted in the ACA, was a public option so that people could decide to, sign up for what would essentially be Medicare. And it would be something that anybody at all ages could sign into, and then you would just basically have Medicare, right? And it would just come out of your taxes, right? That's what the public option would have been. And they stripped that out. They stripped it out in negotiations with Republicans, because the Republicans basically said, we're not voting for this if it has this public option in it. The government has no business being in healthcare, even though Medicare has been part of, is run by the government and is highly successful and highly, highly popular, right? But they wouldn't vote for it. And he really, really, really wanted Republican buy-in. And I don't know why he did, but this was back in the days before shit was so hyper-partisan that, like we have today, right? So they strip it out, and lo and behold, even though they take out and they strip out the public option, and they, acquiesce to the demands of Newt Gingrich at the time, I think it was, and the various Republican people, it's still, they didn't get one vote. One Republican vote. None of them voted for it. Right. And so the only reason we have the ACA now is because Democrats had a majority in both the House and the Senate for 2 years during Obama's first 2 years, right? So yeah, none of them even vote for it. So basically the Republicans just scammed them into taking out, their Obama's biggest contribution to it that he really wanted. And they negotiated that away, and then they didn't vote for it at all anyway. Right. And you would think that the Democrats would have learned their fucking lesson after that shit. You think they would have learned, hey, these guys are not negotiating in good faith, right? They don't care about us. They don't care about what we want, so fuck them. You would think that they would learn that lesson, but they didn't. They didn't learn that lesson. And then the midterms, and the 2010 midterms come along, Democrats get trounced. They get trounced because I really think a lot of people felt betrayed, because, the ACA was such a watered-down piece of shit. Keep in mind, most of the provisions of the ACA didn't even come into effect until 2014 anyway, right? So it's here's this thing where, okay, now you have to, you have to buy health insurance, right? You have to pay for health insurance, and we're not going to even give you the one, government option that everybody said that we wanted. We're not even going to give you that. And you get fined if you don't buy the insurance, right? So basically, what it was, the ACA was essentially Romneycare. It was the Republican idea. This is the idea that came from the Heritage Foundation. That was their alternative, the alternative that they gave to the Clinton people in the 90s. That's what became the ACA, right? And the Republicans shat all over it. So first off, keep that in mind. Keep in mind that if George W. Bush or Donald Trump were to institute the ACA, they would love it. Keep that in mind, okay? Because it's the conservative version of universal health care. That's what the ACA is, right? Instead, and that was the whole reason why they went that route in the first place, was to get conservative buy-in, to get the Republicans to buy into it. Why did they want buy-in so bad from them? They wanted it because they felt that if people would accept it more if it was a bipartisan thing, number one. And then secondly, that they felt that, well, the conservatives wouldn't then try to destroy it once they inevitably took office again. Right. They wouldn't try to repeal it and stuff if they thought that it was like something that, everyone had equal, input on, and especially if it was the conservative plan to begin with, then they thought they would be happy with it, right? Hey, 1911 greater than all, how you doing? I have a whole section at the end of the stream where I'm going to answer your comment that you left the other day, so, that'll be at the end, okay? Anyway, and they had to learn the hard way that, no, that didn't matter. It didn't matter what, because these guys were not negotiating in good faith. And they had to turn against what was essentially their own plan. And that's part of the reason why over, since the ACA was passed, which was in 2009, I think, right? It has been roughly 11 years now, right? And there is still no conservative alternative to the ACA, right? That was the big thing that Trump said he was going to do, over and over again. We're going to repeal and replace the ACA. We're going to repeal Obamacare. We're going to replace it, right? And they never did it. They never did it. They never tried, They tried to repeal it, all right, 100 times, dozens and dozens of times with, and brought it before the Supreme Court, all that stuff. But they never tried to replace it with anything. They never actually proposed an alternative, to any of the policies. It's like, okay, well, and that was the thing. It's like, all right, you want to remove Obamacare, right? What do you have that's gonna, that's, if you remove Obamacare, you're gonna then kick off 20 million people or however many people. I'm just, estimating, right? I think it's something like 20 to 30 million people have gotten health care because of the ACA, right? Because of the ACA subsidies, okay? So what are you going to do if you remove the ACA completely, and that means you remove those subsidies, then all those people can no longer afford health care, right? That's the, so what is your plan in order to help those people keep health care? And there is no plan. There is no conservative plan in order to keep those people to enable them to buy health care at all. The conservative plan is buy health care. That's your plan. Go buy your own health care. Well, people can't afford health care because the rates were too fucking high, right? And, and the healthcare, health insurance companies won't even sell to them before the ACA. That's another thing you got to remember. If you had a pre-existing condition, health insurance companies would not sell you health insurance, right? That's one thing that the ACA does. It gets rid of pre-existing conditions. So what it basically says is they have to sell you insurance. Before they didn't have to. They could go to somebody and be like, okay, you have this you're diabetic or you had cancer before, and even if it was something that you like, a problem that you had that's gone. Oh, you had cancer in the past. You currently don't have cancer, but you had it in the past. That's a pre-existing condition. We're not going to insure you. Shit like that. And it allowed them, because that's the name of insurance. That's how insurance works. That's the name of the game when it comes to insurance, right? Basically, insurance is all about get money from people and don't pay any back. That's how insurance works. The whole point of insurance is, basically, you pay us all this money, and then when you need to take advantage of the service, we're going to deny you the service. That's how health insurance works. That's how car insurance works. That's how fire insurance works. They pour through it, when it comes time for them to actually pony up, they pour through it, with a fucking magnifying glass and to find any reason they can to not actually pay you. All right. Any of you guys ever been in a car accident? I got in an accident once. A lady rear-ended me, right? And what it was that I used to live in this one area that was north of where I was currently living. And I moved, and I didn't tell my insurance that I moved. Because I just moved like a month or something before the shit happens. And then a lady was texting and she rear ends me, right? And I went to go get, my insurance claim. And sure enough, because I said on the claim I was driving to work, and they go, well, wait a minute, you said you were driving to work, but you were driving north, but your work is like south of where you live. Like, they figured that shit out, and they're like, denied my claim and shit. And ultimately it all worked out. The girl just paid me out of pocket for it or whatever, and it wasn't that bad, in the first place. But it's like, yeah, okay, my fucking insurance that, I pay all this money for, and it was like literally the nanosecond that I had to actually use it, suddenly they get fucking like Sherlock Holmes on there, right? Sherlock Holmes on there to find some kind of like issue. And it was like literally I moved like 2 weeks before this shit, like, so I just didn't have time to tell them that I moved, And it was such bullshit. And it's like, that's really what insurance is all about, The ACA, the same shit used to happen in health insurance, right? They'd pour through your medical history. They'd find any reason they could to kick you. Oh, okay, you had, even something like you had acne when you were a child. That's a pre-existing condition. We're kicking you off, right? And they didn't mind, so you'll be like, you'd pay them for fucking 30 years, and then you'd be like, in your 60s, and you'd get cancer, and they'd be like, oh, well, way back in 1978, you went and got acne treatment, and that's a pre-existing condition, so we're going to kick you. Okay, so the 40 years you were paying them money, they didn't give a shit, right? But the minute you go to actually collect, and then when they kick you, do you get a refund for all that money? It's like, oh, well, what about the 40 years I paid you this money, right? All this fucking money I paid you over all these decades. It's like, oh, no, they keep that. You don't get any of that money back. So, it's a fucking total scam. It's a total fucking scam. It's a scheme. Yeah, like I notice here, Booyah says it's a scheme. You're 100% right, Booyah. It's a total fucking scheme, right? The ACA did away with all that, okay? So they couldn't do shit like that anymore. They couldn't, like, they couldn't just kick you off for some shit that happened to you 40 fucking years ago. The minute you need, like, you need their service, right? So, yeah, it's extremely popular, right? And, the Republicans have been trying for years to fucking get rid of it. Well, what do they have, to replace it with? What guarantees do they have that it won't go back to the way it was, where people will just get screwed by their health insurance? Like, nothing. No guarantees whatsoever. No, there's been zero proposals from anybody. If somebody can find a proposal for me from a Republican senator or House member or something, where that they can, like, they had a solution to this, they had an alternative to what's in the ACA, please find it for me, because I couldn't find shit. I couldn't find any alternative conservative Republican health plans that even were, like, proposed in the House or whatever, or in the Senate. I think most legislation comes from the House, or something like that. Like, there has to be a House version of a bill and then a Senate version, and then they have to reconcile or whatever, right? I couldn't find anything from anyone. So if you have it, let me know, because I would like to be surprised here, right? And, so anyway, I don't know how we got on this subject. Oh, yeah, we were talking about Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro and all that shit. Right? And we were talking about, yeah, like, they basically don't have any examples of any policies that actually worked, that actually helps people and has a positive outcome. Not really. So that's why they're doubling down on stupid shit like, the war on fucking Christmas, or the fact that Elliot Page is trans, or something like that, or fucking whatever, that guy that wore the dress last time. I talked about it in my last stream. That guy that wore the, English singer dude that wore a dress on the cover of Vogue or whatever. They're doubling down on stupid shit like that, because they don't actually have any, like, there's, like, no actual examples of a successful conservative policy, like anywhere. Right? Prove me wrong, folks. You know, show me a conservative policy that's like succeeded and actually helped people's lives in this country over the last 4 years. I can't fucking find anything, so. Timothy Dan Hoffer, thank you for joining too, man. It's cool. Yeah, so you guys, please make comments and stuff, and I will take the last 30 minutes of the stream, which will probably be around 4:30, and I'll talk about, and I'll go through and I'll read, you know, the more interesting comments that you guys have put. But I do want to address one comment here that Booyah says. When do you use references when you draw? What's your technique? For stuff like this, I'm just making this up. I don't have any references for this right here. So I'm literally just sort of doodling at this moment. But yeah, sometimes, like, you know, I find it's, for me, when I draw, it's harder to do things like actual real people. You know, that's harder for me still, you know, drawing a person and you know, I think mostly I have things like body proportions down and stuff like that, although sometimes I screw that up too. But like, you know, normal, ordinary, boring people doing normal things is not so easy for me. Hideous, disgusting monsters, like, you know, with like boils and boils and pus and claws and teeth, piece of cake. So so right now I'm not really challenging myself with this right now. This is like, you know, kind of, you know, zen. That's why I can do this really easy and talk at the same time, you know. And it's funny because, like, yeah, I have prior streams where I'll actually try to draw like people and stuff and talk, and it's like it kind of suffers because I have to concentrate more on the drawing, and you can sort of tell, like, you know, a couple where like, oh, this head is way too big or some shit like that. It's because I wasn't concentrating on the drawing, you know. But here I don't really need to concentrate on this. I can basically do this blindfolded. Yeah, and I'm not like bragging about that. It's just because, you know, it's practice. It's literally like, if you want to learn how to draw, it's practice. Just get a sketch pad, carry it with you, draw the same shit 500,000 times. In fact, you know what? I'll give you guys an example. I'll give you guys an example of, you know, all right, well, this paper's all jacked up, but here's a quick example of how to draw a face. And I am going to do this. I can show you this. I can do this upside down because I've done this so many times. So here's how you draw a face, okay? You do something like that, right? You put some eyes right here, right? This line right here is your nose, right? You have these sort of cheekbones that go through that. This becomes your lips right here, right? Lower lip, bottom of the face, right? Then you have ears that attach at the top of your eyes like this, and then you have a forehead, kind of goes through like that, and then you have hair that kind of comes down, right? And, you know, and the reason why I can draw this upside down is because I have drawn this face literally 100 billion times, and so that's why I can do it literally, like, without even really trying. That's all drawing is. Drawing is just, it's just like anything. It's just like, you know, learning how to play the piano or guitar or, you know, anything like that. You just gotta practice. And then I'm a big believer in practice over talent, you know. I think some people are born with some innate talent and they just take to things. Obviously, that's true, but I really think that you can, you know, if you don't practice and refine your talent, then it's not going to go anywhere, you know. So you could be the most talented natural artist in the world, but if you never sit down and actually, like, develop that skill, then you'll just be mediocre. So, anyway, basically what I'm saying is, you know, you can do it, you just gotta practice. Anyway, getting back to the subjects at hand. So, yeah, this kind of segues into the next thing I want to talk about here, because you have the conservative pundits and things like, basically, what the theme of this stream, I guess, is sort of, I named it, fascism is not going away with Trump. Fascism won't end with Trump, right? And that's one aspect. One aspect is sort of that, of how fascism is beginning to come to life in the United States. It's a little more unique. There are certain things that you can see happening in the government. Authoritarianism, like in the government. You can see things like the Trump people putting in like cronies and stuff in certain key jobs. And not just the fact that he like got his son-in-law and his daughter involved in things, but there's lots of news reports about how he's going through and he's kicking out a lot of like career bureaucrats and replacing them with people that are like Trump loyalists, and there'll be like people in jobs that traditionally stay on in the government for years and years and years. And chances are, like, the Biden people aren't going to really clean these guys out for a little while, so there'll be like some bureaucrat somewhere in the EPA or whatever, right? And it'll, and that has a big influence on how policy is actually executed in the country, right? So it's like, okay, you have the policy makers at the top, right? But the way that policy is actually executed and, or whatnot is handled by these sort of civilian career bureaucrats who are like, those are the guys that actually file the paperwork and approve things and levy the fines and shit like that. And if you get like ideologues in there, who like traditionally have a lot of wiggle room about how they want to implement policy, then you'll see things like, for example, let's say, an example would be something like lax enforcement of beef regulations, something like that, or lax enforcement of environmental regulations, or hard crackdowns on illegal immigrants, something like that, of refugee immigrants or something, you know what I mean? Like, it'll be basically just a way of influencing how policy is executed, even when he's no longer part of the, the head of the government, right? And to some extent, every president kind of does this before they leave office, to some extent. If you go back to, say, like, when, like every president will do something like they'll put in a bunch of rules and shit before they leave that the next president has to, like, either undo or just stays. So one thing that comes to mind is back when Bush took over, George W. Bush Jr. took over, there was a rule that Clinton put about arsenic in drinking water, and it was like, Clinton went and he put in this rule that said, okay, an unrealistic amount of arsenic in drinking water is not allowed, right? And then before that, it was like a certain part per million, and he like upped it way high, so that like it was something that it was impossible to filter out. And the whole reason behind that was so that Bush would have to undo that rule, and then it would make him look bad, right? And so there's shit like that happens all the time. So basically, like, so then Bush has to like undo this regulation that Clinton put in because it was an impossible regulation to follow, because there was no scientific way of like filtering out this much arsenic out of drinking water ever. You know what I mean? So like then in the news, like there's a news story that says, Bush undoes, arsenic and drinking water rule, and it makes the Republicans look bad. Shit like that happens all the time. And I'm sure Obama did some of those too before he left, and I'm sure Bush did some of those too, right? But what the Trump people are doing is a little bit beyond that. They're trying to make permanent rules, basically. They're trying to make permanent, changes that will take years and years to undo. This is what deep state really actually means, by the way. When people talk about the deep state, they're not like, communist plants in the fucking government or whatever. The deep state is, what it really means is, solidifying, policy changes through, things like this, things like I guess, let's say, changing rules that are not that easy to undo, or, putting in your political appointees into, positions that are previously held by career civilian Democrats, bureaucrats, stuff like that. So, and that's kind of like, that's one definition of fascism, right, is when the institutions of a government no longer are functioning for the good of the country, but rather for the good of one political party. God damn it, this pencil sucks, by the way. I need a new pencil. That's one definition of fascism. Right, so, for example, your Justice Department is not actually going out and persecuting crimes, but is instead persecuting your political enemies, right? And so by definition, it's like, okay, well, if, our regulatory bodies are not actually doing their job that they're mandated to do, but are instead enforcing the will of one political party, that is a definition of fascism, right? And that's one way that we're actually seeing, the Trump people try to hang on to power in that respect, right? But it's not so much the Trump people as it is just the Republican Party in general. It's sort of like a slow, methodical takeover by one political party of every aspect of our government, right? That's kind of how fascism is starting to manifest in the United States, right? So, in other countries, fascism usually doesn't have this sort of buildup. It's usually just like, when a general takes over or something, Pinochet or whatever, or, Adolf Hitler or Mussolini or something, right? One political party, will usually seize power in a very short amount of time most of the time. And it's not so much in the United States. In the United States, it seems to be just more of slowly changing the institutional, the aims of the institutions into serving one political party, and even more so than one political party, one political class, right? That's kind of how fascism is. So even when you do have Joe Biden as the president, right, a lot of these things he's not going to be able to control if he would even be aware of this shit in the first place. Right? I mean, so anyhow, that's kind of what the theme I was talking about today. But we do see, in the short term, we do see sort of I guess in this country when it comes to the right wing, we're seeing a sort of realignment since the Trump loss, right? We're seeing on one end, some of the Republicans, some of the conservatives are trying to move past the Trump era, So you'll see that on Fox News, for example. People like Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity and stuff. They're trying to sort of let people down slow, right? And they've acknowledged that, the delusion is over, right? The Trump lost, right? They're not going along with the fairy tale story that the election was stolen or whatever. And that's why you're getting a lot of conservatives who are jumping ship and are not watching Fox anymore. They're going to things like Newsmax, OAN, shit like that, right? So you're seeing that group, and then on the other side, you have the hardcore MAGA people who are, and the QAnon people, those guys who are just kind of losing their minds, right? And some of them are getting a little scary. And this is where I wish I was able to play a fucking video for you guys, because I have this guy named Pastor Rick Wiles, all right? And let me just open up this dude, Pastor Rick Wiles, because he is a lunatic. All right. Let's see. Let me turn on my right monitor. Let's see. Let's put that up there. Right monitor. Nope, that's the wrong one. Left monitor. There we go. All right. Pastor Rick Wiles. Right-wing religious lunatic Rick Wiles tells liberals to leave Florida or face slaughter. We're coming after you. Okay. This dude is a complete and total lunatic. Hang on a second. I need to get my notes over here. Let me just pull that over here. All right. Complete and total lunatic. So if you don't know who Rick Wiles is, and you know what? Let me put this in the chat so you guys can see this and follow along if you want to. All right. Let me just turn that off. Let me go back here and put this in the chat. Okay. So if you want to follow along with what I'm reading, there we go. He's completely crazy. He, when during the impeachment, this guy, Rick Wiles, said he called the impeachment a Jew coup. That's what he said. A coup d'etat by Jews, basically. A Jew coup, so he's anti-Semitic, He says that Democrats and scientists should be lined up against the wall and shot. That's a direct quote from this guy, right? And this right here, we're coming after you. This is in reference to the Stand Your Ground law in Florida. Okay, so there's the basically, there was a change in the Stand Your Ground law in Florida, and it was proposed. I don't think this is actually law yet, but the Governor DeSantis there proposed this change in Florida, and this is the relevant text here. The change to Stand Your Ground, right? A person who is not engaged in an unlawful activity and who is attacked in any other place where he or she has a right to be has no duty to retreat and has the right to stand his or her ground and meet force with force, including deadly force if he or she reasonably believes it is necessary to do so to prevent death or great bodily harm to himself or herself or another, to prevent the commission of a forcible felony. Right. So, and then here we go. The proposal would expand the list of forcible felonies under Florida's self-defense law, right, to justify the use of force against people who engage in criminal mischief that results in the interruption or impairment of a business and looting, which the draft defines as burglary within 500 feet of a violent or disorderly assembly. Basically, they're making changes to Stand Your Ground in Florida so that you can do a Kyle Rittenhouse and go shoot protesters. And, that counts as Stand Your Ground. Right. So before Stand Your Ground, right, let's turn this off here. But if you want to read this article, it's actually really good, right? Before Stand Your Ground basically meant that, okay, if someone breaks into your house or you're on the street or something and someone is going to kill you, you have a right to fight back. And now the rule changed. Now, I don't think this has actually been passed yet, but the proposal is, well, if someone's, like breaking into a business or something, then that is the same thing as if they're going to kill you. And now you can, like, meet force with force. So basically, you can blow somebody away now for being out of protest. And, you think they broke into a business, you can just shoot them. And according to this law, you'll be fine. You won't go to jail for that. This guy basically took this and, let me see if I can find the quote of him. Right. So, let's see. Basically, the quote, he basically said that, I wish I could play the video for it. Right. Here we go. So you know what? This time we're going to meet you in the streets. Okay, this is this guy. It's much better. I wish I could play this video, but this is his quote. You know what? This time we're going to meet you in the streets. Come on, left. We're going to meet you in the streets this time. You know what they're doing in Florida? The governor wants a bill passed in Florida to empower citizens to shoot and kill looters and rioters. Yes, sir. Get it done, governor. Right. This guy's a pastor. Okay. That's let's turn that off. Right. Oh wait, wrong one. Let's turn. Where the fuck is my monitor? Left monitor. There we go. This guy's a pastor, for crying out loud. Okay. This dude is supposed to be, this guy's supposed to be like fucking a pastor that's like supposed to be helping you get a personal relationship with Jesus or whatever the fuck pastors do. Interpreting fucking like, Bible passages and shit. Right. And he's basically telling you, listen to that shit. Come and get it. Get it done. Okay. We're coming for you, basically. So that's what's happening with the other half of the right wing. The half of the right wing that's still, it's like they're kind of descending into this violent, ultra-violent fantasy. When you have like a pastor, right, somebody that you think talks to fucking God, telling you to go out and shoot leftists, right? Is it any surprise when somebody actually does it after that? That is another component in the fascist takeover of our country, basically. You have basically like your ruling class. That pastor guy is part of the ruling class, trying to incite violence from, against a political enemy, be that a minority or whatever. You got to remember back in, Nazi Germany, it wasn't just, brown shirts and shit like that who engaged in violence, right? You had ordinary citizens and shit jumping in on that too. You know what I mean? Ordinary people getting caught up in the fervor and turning in their Jewish friends, right? Or like going to the SS and saying, hey, I think this guy over here is hiding fucking Jewish people in his attic or whatever, right? And that's part of having a fascist society like that is when, there's incentive for the average person to turn on his neighbor, right? For whatever reason, whatever that incentive may be. Okay. That's what this is. That's what this guy is trying to fucking do. He's trying to turn people against their neighbors, right? Whereas, before, you wouldn't give a shit. And think about why. Because they're a leftist. Well, what the fuck does leftist even mean in this country? Right? Like what? You're gay? Does that make you a leftist in this country? You want people to have health care. I guess that makes me a leftist, right? I want people to be able to have health care who can't afford it, right? I want people to be able to vote in this country when they want to vote, and not have to worry about showing an ID or getting kicked off the voter rolls or like having one drop off fucking box in an entire county. Does that make me a leftist? Right. I want to people who come to this country to be able to become citizens without having to wait 23 fucking years. Right. I want refugees who come here from a war-torn country, right, where most of the time those countries are war-torn because of the actions of our government. I want them to be able to come here and make a new life for themselves, right, and not have to wait half a fucking lifetime in order to, like, do that, right. That makes me a leftist, I guess, right. Shit, it's like, I don't have to be walking around with a copy of fucking, like, Mao's Red Book, right, and a big-ass fucking Marxist beard or whatever, talking about like, advocating for seizing the means of production from the, from the fucking crony capitalist class or whatever, to be a Marxist, I guess. I guess if I just want like normal, ordinary shit that like every other country on earth already has, that makes me a fucking Marxist. That means this guy wants to kill me, right? There was a thing on Reddit. I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a minute, right? I'm going to tell you guys a story, okay? On Reddit, there's a subreddit. It's called Hold My Fries, right? And what it is it's pictures and GIFs of fat people doing funny things, okay? Funny or amazing things. Like one of them was like a guy who's like really overweight and he starts breakdancing and he's really awesome at breakdancing. And it was like, oh, that's cool, right? And, there's a bunch of subreddits like this. One's called Hold My Cosmo. It's the exact same thing except with like, women. And then another one is called Hold My Beer. And it's like, a guy like will do something really dumb or really amazing, And so Hold My Fries is the exact same thing except with fat people, right? And, I'm about 25 pounds overweight still. So it's like, okay, I'm fat. I was a fat kid growing up. At one point, I weighed 230 pounds at my largest, As of this morning, I weigh 190. I think maybe it was 191 after Thanksgiving. I went up a little bit, right? So, I've lost weight, I've gained weight. I'm still overweight, but I'm not, I'm not 300 pounds or some shit like that. But still, I can understand being fat sucks, right? So I watch this thing because it's funny sometimes. And there was a GIF of a guy who was really fat. He was like 300 pounds or some shit. And he flips a cookie off of his stomach and it goes up in the air and he catches it in his mouth. And then he does like a thumbs up, And I thought that was funny, right? And I was like, all right. So I went on and I made a comment. I'm like, sometimes you just gotta own it, and when your life deals you something bad or whatever, sometimes you just gotta own it. And I got a lot of shit from people in this sub because, this subreddit, because I was not sufficiently bigoted enough against this guy, right? Because I said when life gives you, when life treats you bad. And I got all kinds of comments from people saying shit like, well, if you mean by life, if you eat too many donuts, then yes, you know what I mean? All kinds of shit from people who were like angry that I wasn't sufficiently bigoted enough against this guy because he was fat. And, the fact that I managed, that I showed just the slightest bit of sympathy for a dude who was like really overweight, even though he was eating a fucking cookie during this. It's like, I guess if you're fat, you're just never allowed to eat cookies ever again, I guess that's what it is. If you're overweight, you're just not allowed to ever like, have anything ever. I guess you just have to like subside on carrots and celery and shit for the rest of your life until you're back to like a manageable weight or whatever, and that's the thing. It's like, I wasn't making excuses for this guy, right? I wasn't like making excuses. I wasn't trying to say that he was like healthy even though he was fat. I didn't say shit. All I said was, I was expressing my solidarity with a guy who was taking a shitty situation. The fact that he was massively, grotesquely overweight, because he was massively overweight, this dude. Like, this dude was like fucking 300 pounds, like massive, right? And I was taking this guy who took a situation that he was in and was making the best out of it and having fun and enjoying himself, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, being fat sucks, and it's wrong when you're in denial that you're fat, right? It's wrong when you're like, try to bullshit people into thinking it's, some kind of medical condition or whatever. Yeah, that's all wrong. I admit all that. That's wrong, right? I mean, and I know how it is being someone who was, fat my entire life. I know all about it. Even now, right now, I'm like in my 40s and shit. I'm actually in the best shape I've been in ever since 18 at this moment. I owe that all to my wife and shit, And even now, I'm still overweight by like I said, I'm 25 pounds overweight, right? But even there, it's like, I understand, I have sympathy for this guy. I know what it's like, right? I understand what it's like to be discriminated against, and to feel powerless because you don't think that anything, because you don't know how to diet or whatever. You don't know how to lose weight. They don't teach you how to lose weight when you're in school or whatever. They don't teach you how to count calories and, work out effectively or whatever, right? And if I would have known what I know now about losing weight, if I would have known that when I was, 25, then my life, I think, would, have been a lot less depressing. I probably would have gotten laid a lot more, as a younger man, for sure. But still, so, and that's what it is. That's like, I wasn't sufficiently bigoted enough for these people to approve. You know what I mean? I think that's what we're seeing a lot now when it comes to, why am I telling this story, right? I think we're seeing that now when it comes to the MAGA people, the QAnon people, the people who invested a lot of their identity into just Donald Trump and this sort of make-believe conservatism that followed around him, right? I think we're seeing that now. We're seeing that because they're starting to jump ship from the more, moderate conservative media elements, things like Fox, right? Fox is actually a little more moderate now. If you compare Fox to OAN, it's like Fox is the reasonable one, right? I don't know if you've like OAN is like the real insane shit. Those are the people that think Donald Trump has like here's something I want to show you guys this picture here. Let me just open this up, right? Let me just move this over here and maybe actually no. You know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna turn that on. I'm going to go here. I'm going to turn on my left monitor. Wrong one. Right monitor. This is OAN, okay? This is what they showed on their channel, Seized Skyttle data shows landslide win for President Trump. So there's a conspiracy theory, right, that Trump's Department of Justice had a firefight, right, with the CIA in Germany and seized this server that was, holding all the data for these Dominion voting machines. This is the conspiracy theory, right? And the information on this server shows that Donald Trump actually had 410 electoral votes. And so then they show this on OAN. And the people watching it, if you didn't know better, if you were just surfing channels and then you came across this, you would see this and you would think Donald Trump won the election, right? And you wouldn't know that this was all from some really wacky, ridiculous, horseshit, made-up conspiracy theory that has no basis in rational fucking reality, right? This is the kind of shit you're seeing on, on OAN, on Newsmax, stuff like that, right? And it's sort of like, that's where all the conservatives are flocking to, right? The portion, I don't want to say all of them, but the portion of conservatives are flocking to the crazy ones who invested their fucking lives into this shit. And it's just like I said with my Reddit story, it's sort of like because the other ones are not bigoted enough for them, right? So Trump is no longer bigoted enough. Trump is no longer crazy enough. I mean, not Trump. Fox News is what I meant to say. Fox News is no longer bigoted or crazy enough for these people. So now they're like going some other place. They have to get their fill of insane shit from somewhere else. And there's apparently no lack of right-wing grifters who will just take advantage of these people and feed them the horseshit that they want to hear. You know what I mean? So this is starting to manifest in pretty insane ways. You're seeing these guys jumping ship from Fox, which I thought I would never see. You know, you're starting to see in Georgia, for example, the MAGA people are turning against the Republican Party in Georgia. You're getting calls to boycott the election in Georgia, and this is another reason where I wish I could play a video, right? Because there was these two people, right? There's a guy named Linwood and another person named Sidney Powell, and there are these two lawyers, right, who are going around and they're in Georgia basically leading a GOP boycott for the election, right? So just a quick sort of recap to get all you guys back up to speed. There was a recount election because no candidate in Georgia for the Senate, right, got more than 50%, and that automatically triggers a recount for the senators, right? And basically, whoever wins the election in for the Senate in Georgia controls the Senate, right? So now all eyes are on Georgia right now. Now, this is only for the Senate, right? The presidential vote in Georgia has already been certified. So Georgia's going to Joe Biden, right? That's already a done deal, and there's nothing anybody can do about that. So now the GOP is starting to revolt, and there's people going around basically like saying, because what happened? Well, over the last, year, Donald Trump has been telling everybody, right, that the election is rigged and all of this other shit, and they're cheating, right? And then, lo and behold, Joe Biden wins Georgia, so now all the Republicans there think that it's just, doesn't matter. They think that the election was rigged, and why should they bother voting now? And this is making the GOP in Georgia lose their fucking shit in fear because, something like 56% of Republican voters in Georgia think it was all rigged now. So they can't win this runoff election if 56% of their voters don't come out and vote, which is, I think, first off, good, and second, it's fucking hilarious. It's fucking hilarious, and if the Democrats actually manage to win this runoff election because the GOP was so fucking stupid that they thought the vote was already like, they thought it was all decided and shit because Donald Trump lost, that would just be, oh my god, that's just a cherry on the top of wacky ridiculousness. It's sort of like, it's sort of like Frankenstein's monster, like the GOP and Trump spend all this time telling everybody, they've created this monster. Now it's gotten out of control. Now it's biting them in the ass in the end. And it's like, well, gee, maybe you shouldn't have made up all these fucking lies about how the election was rigged and all that shit, because now people aren't going to go vote for you because they think it was rigged. And that's fantastic. And I wish I could play this video for you guys, but I'll just put, here's a link to a Hill article about it. I'm sure you've probably heard about this because this is in the news and stuff, but in case you haven't, there's the there's a Hill article there. Cephas, thank you for joining, by the way, Cephas. Appreciate it. And Timothy Dattenhofer, thank you for joining too. Thanks, guys. Anyway, but that's a cool Hill article there. Republicans scramble to counter calls to boycott Georgia runoffs. I just think that shit's fucking hilarious. Now, there's some people that think that these two people, Linwood and Sidney Powell, are Democratic plants. Breitbart did a story about how they contributed to Obama and shit like that, and that may be true, but you got to remember, anything that Breitbart says is a lie. Breitbart is not a trustworthy news source, so just because they say that these people contributed to Democrats or that they're Democratic plants doesn't mean that they actually are. And besides the fact, that doesn't mean that even if they did contribute to Democrats, well, Democrats in Georgia are traditionally usually very conservative as well. So it's like, you got to remember, one's a political party and one's a ideology. You know what I'm saying? So Republicans are not always conservative and Democrats are not always liberal. That's just how it usually tends to shake out. You know, like people tend to equate them with each other. It's like, no, there are conservative Democrats and there are liberal Republicans. Just it's becoming less and less, it seems, as time goes on. So, anyway, I just thought that shit's hilarious. That's one example of what the base is starting to revolt. And they're revolting because, you know, it's like the establishment GOP is not fascist enough for them. You know, another example of this is that MAGA is turning against Bill Barr now. I don't know if you guys have seen that, because Bill Barr came out and said that there is no proof that any election fraud exists, and whatever election fraud there wasn't enough to influence the election, right? So he's like essentially not backing up Trump because it's made up bullshit, and in his official capacity he's basically saying, well, there's not enough evidence. There's not enough evidence to show that the election was stolen. And of course now this means that Donald Trump is probably going to fire Bill Barr because he's not going along with his shit, and all of the MAGA people are starting to attack Bill Barr now as well. And it's like another example, you know, Bill Barr is a guy that like bent over backwards to give Trump everything he fucking wanted, right? He's essentially, Bill Barr is a lackey is what he is, you know, and he has been for years. He's like the go-to guy, you know, to make sure that Republicans get away with breaking the law. You know, if you want to read up some stuff about Iran-Contra and all that shit, you know, that's Bill Barr, making sure everybody got away with everything, right? And just, you know, Bill Barr just won't, you know, he wouldn't just make shit up for Donald Trump, you know. Donald Trump wants Bill Barr to go and arrest Joe Biden before the election. Bill Barr says he has to actually commit a crime, right? Then suddenly, yeah, all the MAGA people turn against Bill Barr, and then Donald Trump says, "Okay, I want you to investigate, you know, fucking voter fraud." Bill Barr says there's no evidence. Now Donald Trump is probably going to fire Bill Barr. You know, he's going to fire him like less than 60 days before he leaves office. You know. And that's basically showing you what Donald Trump has on the shelf, you know. That's another really aspect of fascism right there, right? When, you know, bending the execution of institutional power to the aims of one individual, right? Authoritarianism. And, you know, if not fascism, it's authoritarianism, right? Basically, treating it like, you know, treating Bill Barr like he works for Trump specifically, right? Instead of being in charge of the, you know, Department of Justice like he's supposed to be, you know. And that's like, there you go. Another expression of fucking, you know, is that going to go away once Donald Trump leaves, you know? Well, most likely. You know, once Biden gets in there and he actually puts in another attorney general that isn't a fucking lapdog to him, you know. But I think what it kind of goes to show is that we don't have any, we don't, you know, our institutions are not as resilient as we all thought, you know. I think that's one positive thing to the Trump presidency that we can show. It kind of exposed that a lot of, you know, I'm going to turn this like this, okay. A lot of what we thought was codified in the law really wasn't, and it was all just, you know, norms and traditions, right? Like a lot of the things, because you would think that it would be against the law for a president to direct an investigation, right? And say, okay, I want you to go investigate this, this, and that. You would think that would be against the law, you know, or I want you to, you know, another example. Donald Trump basically told Bill Barr to, you know, lessen the sentence against Roger Stone, right? So Roger Stone originally, you know, his sentence was for a lot more time, you know, and then it was like potentially for, you know, way more time than what he eventually got. He got something like less than 3 years, and that was because Donald Trump went to Bill Barr and, you know, told him to fucking let Roger Stone off. Bill Barr then goes and, like, you know, gives the official recommendation for Roger Stone's sentence, and it was something like 72 months, right? Or some shit like that. And that actually caused a bunch of, like, career people and, you know, career prosecutors to, like, resign in protest over that, you know. And you would think it's like, so it's basically just Donald Trump, like, directing Bill Barr to let one of his friends get off easy, you know. You would think that would be against the law, shouldn't it? A president shouldn't be able to go to the attorney general and be like, hey, this guy's my friend. I don't want him going to jail, you know, so I want you to give him, like, a bullshit sentence, right? And then Donald Trump turns around and pardons Roger Stone anyway, right? And you would think that would be against the law. You would think that would be something that, you know, a president should be able to get impeached for, or at the very least, the attorney general should be able to get impeached for, or even arrested for. But no, there's no law against that. You know, that's the kind of shit that we should concentrate on. Now that you know, we have this chance with, you know, Trump being forced out of office, you know, losing the election, right? We have this chance now to put in some fucking rules against that kind of thing, right? Pass some laws that says, hey, you know, president shouldn't be allowed to just fucking, like, stack all of this shit with his best friends, right? With cronies and his best friends, and just, like, allow his fucking, like, you know, allow his friends to get away with crime like that, right? Shouldn't be allowed to do that. You shouldn't be, you know, the attorney general should be 100% independent, right? Should not be at the president's beck and call like that. You know, the president shouldn't be able to interject himself into investigations and, like, cancel investigations and ask for them to be started elsewhere or whatever. The president should have no influence over that stuff whatsoever. And traditionally in the past, they haven't. And this, you know, Trump and Barr have shown that, you know, no, there is no actual law against it. There's no institutional protections against that sort of abuse of power. And there should be. And this is what, you know, this is one of the things that we need to fix. Right? And I don't understand even if you're a conservative, if you're, you know, if you think that I'm some kind of a deranged fucking leftist commie hippie, I still don't see how you could disagree with that shit. Okay? Because what if Joe Biden did the same thing? What if Joe Biden gets whatever, you know, whatever his attorney general is, and then has them go off and tells them to go start persecuting, like, Donald Trump Jr. or something, right? For shit, you know, and then you think that, well, you know, maybe this is a politically motivated fucking thing, right? See, there shouldn't even be the opportunity for a president to be able to persecute his political enemies like that, right? It should be the attorney general should independently look at the evidence and decide, was a crime committed, and if a crime was fucking committed, then he does it, and it doesn't matter who the target is. It could be the president's best fucking friend. It could be the president's mother. It doesn't matter, right? It could be the president's daughter, right? It could be, like, the top fundraiser to the DNC or the RNC or whatever. It doesn't fucking matter who they are, right? That's what equal protection under the law actually means. Equal protection under the law also means that everybody, right, is subject to that law. Right. Another thing we have to get rid of is this dumb shit idea that a president can't, like, a sitting president can't be arrested. That's bullshit. That needs to go away. All right. The fucking president commits crimes. The president needs to be held accountable, right? Because it's been shown, because during the Trump years we've just demonstrated that it's too fucking easy. It's too easy for a sitting president to abuse his power and just get away with shit, you know? And it's like, I mean, think about it. Pretty much everyone that they've tried to hold accountable over the last 4 years has gotten away with it. You know, everyone who's crossed Trump has been persecuted, right? Everyone in Trump's camp that we tried to, like, hold accountable, Michael Flynn, right, Roger Stone, you know, fucking Paul Manafort, all those guys got away with it. He's probably going to pardon all the people that haven't like been let out already. He's probably going to pardon them all before he leaves anyway, right? You know, there's even talks about how Trump is thinking of doing a preemptive pardon for his children, right? Eric Trump, Don Trump Jr., and Ivanka all getting a pardon, as well as Rudy Giuliani. He's thinking of doing that. Just blanket pardons for all the shit that they did, whether, you know, any crimes that they committed during, you know, the time that he was in office, thinking of just doing that. Why is that allowed? Why is that even possible? That is, you know, I couldn't believe that shit. I thought that was bullshit. I looked it up. It's true. The president can do that. The president can actually be like, okay, all the fucking, anything that you, any crime, federal crime, that you did between the time of, you know, January 21st, 2017 and January 21st, you know, 20th, 2021, all of those you just get a pardon for. Bam. And it doesn't matter. Whatever the fuck it is, whatever federal crime that was, they just get away with it instantly. That shit should be against the law. I don't understand that shit. You know, you should have to actually be accused of a crime first or be convicted of a crime. I don't even think accused is good enough. I think if you get convicted of a crime, then you can get a pardon. Right. I don't understand this, like, preemptive pardon shit. Because that is the most abusive shit ever. Because basically, they could have just planned that from the beginning. And then that means, okay, this entire time, they could have just been robbing us all blind on purpose, and just for the president to just pardon them. And then they get away with it. And who's going to stop him? He's the president. You can't arrest a sitting president. It's such bullshit. You know? That's a serious issue. And that is also another aspect of fascism, right? When people in power use that power for their own ends, right? And no matter what, are never held accountable and are never held to the same standard as everybody else. That's fascism right there, right? When you can go to jail for doing some shit, but when they do it, they don't go to jail. That's one aspect of fascism, right? The idea that the laws do not, you know, the laws are not applied the same to everybody, right? That there's one class of people who are just protected, you know, they're above everybody else, right? Through whatever reason, you know, whether they're like born into it, you know, they're fucking royalty, right? Or if they're party members. That was another thing. You would see that shit in the Soviet Union. Party members would get away with crap that non-party members wouldn't, you know. Or you'd see that kind of thing in, you know, Nazi Germany. You'd see that kind of thing too. You know, people who were part of the Nazi party had special protections and special privileges that other people didn't fucking get. And they wouldn't be persecuted for things like rape, right? That kind of thing, you know. They get away with it, right? And that's, you know, traditionally we don't usually see shit like that in the United States, right? Most of the time it's through class in the United States, you know. Super rich guy murders someone, gets away with it because he can afford like an awesome lawyer, right? But not because of like their, you know, they support the fucking president or something. And that's what we're starting to see right now. We're starting to see like, oh, you're one of my guys, I'm going to get you off. That's what's fucking happening. And that's another aspect of fascism. I don't see that going away anytime soon. I think the next Republican that comes on, you know, if it's whoever it is that runs, if it's fucking, you know, let's imagine Rick Santorum or some shit becomes the next Republican president, which will probably happen, you know, in 4 years, right? If it's not Donald Trump again, you know, hopefully it won't. Hopefully Donald Trump will, like, be in prison in 4 years or something, you know. But, you know, whatever Republican president comes back is just going to start all this shit all over again. And it's up to us, man. You know, we have a very limited window of time in order to enact some reforms, in order to stop this shit from fucking happening, in order to prevent fascism from taking an even deeper root in our country, right? Holy shit. Okay. A couple of other things I wanted to talk about here. Let's see. I wanted to show you some videos about some things, but fuck, I can't show any videos. You know, that's kind of fucked up. Let's see. We got hour and a half. Let's take the last half hour. Let's go over some of our comments here. So I want to go over some of your comments, and then I have some comments that one of our viewers here, who's actually in the stream, 1911 greater than all. I have a comment that you left that I want to get to, but let's read some of the comments here that we have from some of the people. So first we got Booyah Amadon. Let's see. Conservative Republicans need an enemy to survive. Well, yes, guess they do. And I think that is one of the things that makes them so attractive to people, right? Because, you know, because you're right. Politics is usually very boring. Right? It is. Politics is a boring thing, especially like during any normal given year when you don't have shit like a pandemic or like fucking massive wildfires or a war or something. You know, usually when times are good, politics are boring, right? When times are good, you know, like during the 1990s, for example, right? During the 1990s, it was a decade of relative peace and harmony, right, in the country. If any of you guys are too young to remember the 90s, you know, it was actually a great time to be alive because we didn't have all of this shit that's going wrong today. Usually wasn't really that big of a thing back then, you know. Whoa, what the fuck? This thing just fell off. Alright, anyway. That was funny. Okay. I'm not going to bother trying to put that back on. Anyhow, you know, it was a decade of relative peace and prosperity. You know, you had your first .com boom, and you had lots of jobs everywhere, and, you know, the country wasn't that polarized yet. It was starting to happen, but not so much. We didn't have fucking 2 wars in the Middle East that went on for 15 years each or anything like that, and occasionally there would be some crazy shit happening here and then. You know, you had things like the Oklahoma City bombing and stuff like that, but it wasn't like the country wasn't super polarized like it is today, you know. And as part of a result of that, you had very low voter turnouts, very low, you know. And it was like, I remember, because the first time I voted when I was like 18, I think it was like 1996 or something like that. And I remember reading how it was like it was something like less than 40% of people voted back then. And I don't even know what it is now, but I know it's, you know, I know it hasn't gone up that much. It actually, this last election actually had a very high turnout. And it was still less than 50%. You know what I mean? Like, of eligible voters. It was still something like less than 50% of eligible voters still voted, and it was like really high this time. And I remember thinking about that because another stat that I remember reading was in Russia. When Russia had their first elections after the wall fell down, their first election in Russia had an 80% turnout. Right, 80% of people, you know, and it was mainly because they weren't able to vote ever, and this was the first time they were ever able to vote, and it was a new thing to people, and everybody wanted to do it, you know. And I remember thinking about that. I'm like, damn, what would the country be like if 80% of the people voted, you know? And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, well, when shit's good, nobody has very much to complain about, then being politically active is kind of a distraction, you know. When it's boring, when you don't have to worry that, you know, when it's boring, then you don't care, you know. And part of the thing was you didn't have to, like every election back then wasn't the end of the world, you know. Bill Clinton runs against Bob Dole, if either one of those guys won, it wouldn't have fucking mattered, right? You know, Bob Dole wouldn't, if Bob Dole won the election, he wouldn't start another war. He wouldn't, like, tank the economy. He wouldn't, like, allow, you know, 275,000 people to die during a pandemic. Like, you didn't have to worry that he was going to destroy the country, you know. You kind of have to worry about that now, right? You kind of have to worry about, like, hey, if the wrong person wins, then in 4 years there may not be a United States. Didn't have to, that wasn't a problem in 1996. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like, yeah, you know. So getting back to what you said, you know, they need an enemy to survive. That's kind of like part of what's happening, is the reason why it's become so polarized because of that, you know, because of it's easier to get people to come out and be engaged if they think that, you know, they think that their civic engagement is directly responsible for saving the country, you know. And that's something that Republicans have been really good at over, actually, since starting in the 90s, starting with people like Rush Limbaugh, you know, and Alex Jones and Sean Hannity, guys like that. You know, they've basically spent the last 30 years polarizing people, you know. Like, if there's anybody to blame for the current state of relations, political relations in this country, it's those guys, right? It's conservative pundits like those guys, because they've spent the last 30 years creating this environment, this highly polarized environment where, you know, people are afraid every year, you know, and you have, like, you know, people think that, like, evil commies and shit are trying to take over and, like, you know, destroy the country and take away your guns and all that shit, you know, when in real life they just want to, like, make sure you get health care. Right? Like, you have guys like that to blame. You have people like Rush Limbaugh to blame, you know, and Sean Hannity and all that, because that's how they make money. They make money dividing people and polarizing, you know, creating this environment that we're in now. That's how those guys got rich, you know. So if you want to blame someone for the reason why everything's so fucked up, the reason why we have somebody like Donald Trump, or why, like, you know, there's an entire fucking movement in this country of people who think that wearing a mask is like some kind of commie fucking plot, right? Blame those guys, because they're the ones that enabled this shit in the first place, you know, so that they could sell books and get ratings. All right. Anyway, let's see. Let's see, 1911, I'm going to read an entire thing from you, so I'm just going to skip over your comment there, but I have an entire thing from you there that I'm going to get to. Timothy Dannenhofer, Democrats are going to get annihilated in the 2022 midterms if they don't give the working class much of what they need. Want. The Democratic Party probably doesn't give two shits if that happens. Yeah, you're right. That is what's going to happen. I think they're probably going to get destroyed in the midterms. It's starting to look that way. I don't even think it's really going to be, you know, I think a lot of it will have to do with the fact that Trump is not on the ballot. So they won't be able to get as many people to the polls as usual as they did this last time, because this last election really was about how people hated Donald Trump and not so much about how they liked the Democrats or Joe Biden. So yeah, I think that you're definitely right. And what could save them, actually, is the progressives. People like, you know, Bernie Sanders, right? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, whatever. You know, it would really help them if they were to try to get some actual shit passed, right? Some good reform on something. Healthcare, for example. If they were to actually try to get that passed, and then they could make the case to people like, hey, if we don't hang on to our majorities, then this isn't going to happen for you, right? That would be a good strategy for them. But I think you're right. I think it's not going to happen. And I think, actually, a lot of shit is really getting ready to go south really quick in this country, and I think the Democrats are going to get blamed for it. So, for example, um, I don't think we're going to get sufficient COVID stimulus, right? I think Mitch McConnell is going to block that, you know, and we're not going to get another payment, right? And this is doubly so if they fail to take Georgia and you know the Senate stays in Republican hands, right? Then this is like a given. There, Mitch McConnell will not pass any kind of stimulus whatsoever if that happens. So what will happen is that people are going to lose the stimulus that they have now, right? And they're going to blame the government, and they're going to blame Democrats because Joe Biden is president. And it just so happens that, you know, whatever party is in charge of the presidency is usually seen as the party that's running the country, even if that's not true, right? And that's going to lead to Republicans winning majorities in the Senate and House in 2022. See, that's really why this is so important, right? Because McConnell is under no obligation whatsoever to allow anything to get through now. And it'll just really, if he remains the Senate Majority Leader, then we're really going to see that, you know, the Biden years are just going to be a repeat of what happened to Obama. You know, everything is going to get blocked, right? There won't be any stimulus. There won't be shit, right? And lots of fucking people, you know, even though we have like, you know, things like vaccines and shit on the way, right? It's not going to come soon enough. Vaccines aren't going to be around until probably next summer, you know, on a widespread basis, right? So it's just starting just right now, right? So they've got to ramp it up, and you know, they're giving it to like doctors and healthcare workers and shit first, right? We're still not going to see it. The general public is still not going to be able to go get a vaccine until April or May, you know. So get ready for at least another 4 or 5 months of sheltering in place, right? And during that time, people are still going to get screwed as far as like, you know, their jobs goes, because we have shutdowns still. People can't get out. A lot of places aren't hiring, right? A lot of things, like I've said this in multiple live streams, but it bears repeating. Things like a lot of small businesses have gone out of business permanently. You know, they're estimating something like 40% of small businesses are just gone, right? And, you know, Democrats are going to get blamed for all that shit. And if it only benefits the Republicans if Mitch McConnell doesn't pass any stimulus to help any of this, right? Now you're seeing that, okay, because they're saying that, okay, well, he proposed a couple of bills, you know, and they're fighting over them, stuff like that, right? Mitch McConnell's bill doesn't actually help anybody. So he proposed a couple of $500 billion skinny bills. They're not helping shit, okay? There's no actual payments to people. There's no stimulus checks in those bills. Those bills are to basically give more money to corporations. And the main reason why what's in those bills that Mitch McConnell wants to pass in those skinny bills, right? The one that they just made, supposedly they just made a compromise on. The main thing he wants to get through is liability protection, so that you can't sue your job if your job does not take sufficient protections to stop the spread of COVID. That's what he wants to push through. That's what Mitch McConnell really wants to get through. He wants to make it so that, like, say you work at a restaurant and there's a mask mandate in place or something, and the guy that runs your restaurant says don't wear a mask, you know, I don't believe in it. And if you wear a mask, you're fired, so you don't wear a mask, and then you get COVID-19, then he wants to make it so that you can't sue you can't sue your employer for that. That's what he wants to do. You know, he wants liability protections for businesses, and so that they are not liable for employees who get sick because the business did not take sufficient protections. That's what his bills are all about, right? And I'm really hoping, because, you know, they just said like yesterday, I saw in the news that there was like some kind of compromise over one of these bills, and I'm really hoping that's not in there, because that's going to happen, you know? That's happening now. Right now, there's already lawsuits of people suing because they got fucking sick, because whatever, like, business they're in is not paying attention to, like, proper fucking controls, you know? Kind of goes to show you, once again, you know, what the Republicans really fucking give a shit about. They don't actually care about you. You know, they care about your fucking boss and his business, because, you know, he's fucking the one that gives them money. All right? Anyway, let's see. Timothy Dannenhofer. Democrat voters need to learn that the Democratic Party does not give a shit about them. Republican voters need to learn that the Republican Party does not give a shit about them. We need revolution. We all need to take it to them instead of a civil war going at each other. Yeah? That's true, you know. They don't care because we're not making them care. You know what I mean? And I think the Republicans actually are much better at this. They're much better at forcing their party to give them the shit they want. Right. For example, you have these guys in Georgia, like we were talking earlier about, you know, these people in Georgia who are boycotting the election. You would never see anything like that from Democrats, right? Democrats just wouldn't show up to vote. There wouldn't be an active boycott. Like, you know, there wouldn't be like a boycott and then Democrats going, give us this, this, and this, or we're not voting for you. That would never fucking happen. So, yeah, I would say that the Republicans are much better. I mean, even though I don't agree with the shit that they want, obviously, they are much, much better at holding their elected officials accountable. You know, maybe a little too effective. Right. But it's definitely true. You're definitely correct there that they don't really care, because, you know, it's the moneyed interests that are the people that actually run everything, right? And the way you fight moneyed interests is with organization. So, you know, the corporations and people like Amazon and like fucking Raytheon and all that, they're always going to have more money than you. You know, you can't compete when it comes to money, right? So you're not going to be able to, like, you know, you're not going to be able to give them the same type of contributions to, you know, a political campaign that those guys can do. What you can do is you can counter that with people, and that's an effective strategy. That's the, you know, what Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and shit, that's what they do. You know, they can't compete with the money, so they go out and they get people, you know. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to, is it doesn't really matter how much money they raise. What comes down to is how many people vote, you know. I think this last election was a good example of that. So, you know, what you're saying is true, but, you know, we already know the way that to fight against that. You know, it's you got to get involved, right? Let's see. Let's move down. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, 1911. I have better health care through my employer compared to Obamacare. All you have to do is research your work insurance before you sign on to your job. Well, Obamacare does not actually provide health care. Right. The ACA will give you a subsidy so that you can buy health care. So it just so happens that the health care you're getting from your employer is better than things you can find on the open market. Is that what you're talking about? Because that would be true. I mean, that would make sense, right? ACA doesn't actually give you health care. What it does is there's an open marketplace, right? And if you make less than a certain amount of money, then they'll subsidize you to pay for whatever. So, I mean, if that's true, if your employer is giving you better insurance than you would get through the open marketplace, then yeah, that's probably true. I mean, I think that's the same with me also. I have insurance through my wife's job because it's like fantastic insurance and it's better than what my job gives. So we go with that. And it's like a plan that would cost way too much if I were to buy it on the open market, even with subsidies. So that's definitely true. I mean, it could be a true thing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, though, so I'm going to move on. Moving on a little bit here. Let's see. Blah 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 blah. Tax motherfucker into nothingness. Yeah, that's true. um, let's see. This one is from Cephas. How you doing, Cephas? Fascism is a false term for political ideals that go against the modern political ideals. What? Uh, Fascism is a false term for political ideals that go against the modern political ideals? I don't know about that. Um, there is there is an actual definition to fascism, which is, um, when it's basically the when government and big business are indistinguishable, right? Essentially, fascist power is corporate power. If you look at Nazi Germany and Mussolini and all that stuff, right? That's basically what it is. It was allowing corporations, giving ruling of power to corporations essentially. I think what happens, and I think I'm guilty of this too, is people often equate fascism with authoritarianism, you know. And it's like in a lot of respects they share a lot of there's a lot of overlap. They share a lot of qualities, but they're not exactly the same thing. You could have, technically something that would be considered benevolent fascism, but by that point it would be called something else. It'd be called something like, corporatism or something like that. Wouldn't exactly be the same. Fascism does have an essential component, though. It has a couple of shared components, I guess, that you would see across fascist regimes around the world. There's always a romanticized sort of mythological past that the leader romanticizes, right? You saw that in Nazi Germany a lot. We're gonna bring back the greatness of the Germanic people, right? You're seeing that here. Make America great again, right? Same thing with Mussolini. Mussolini wanted to recreate the Roman Empire, right? So you have that. You have an other that a minority group or something that gets persecuted, right? And that's something that's mostly unique to fascism. You don't really see that in just general authoritarianism. You can have an authoritarian regime and not persecute people. Something like Mubarak in Egypt, for example, was an authoritarian regime, and to my knowledge, there wasn't anything like they didn't really persecute specific religious or ethnic groups. I mean, they might have. I could be wrong about that. Or Pinochet is another example. As far as I know, Pinochet didn't there wasn't an equivalent, persecution of minority groups. But I could be wrong there too, so that's more of a sort of a neo-fascist authoritarian thing going on that Pinochet had, right? But it's so yeah, I mean that's one thing that they tend to share, and you definitely saw that in the United States too. They persecuting Muslims, Trump's Muslim ban, illegal aliens, immigrants and stuff getting thrown into cages and having their children taken away, shit like that. That was definitely, that fits the bill there too. So it's like, Donald Trump kind of hits all of those markers for a fascist regime, in a lot of ways, and also another thing, a fascist regime doesn't actually always have to murder people or start a war or whatever, but and one can argue if Donald Trump is actually ready to take that step, if he was going to start gassing people or whatever, but I don't know, so far not really, although they have kind of ramped up federal executions in the last couple of months or so, but anyway. Let's see, let's move on a little here. All right, there's a lot of comments, a lot of really good comments from you guys today. But I do want to talk a little bit about here. So I've got, let me just go to my YouTube thing here, because there was one specific comment that 1911 greater than all made, right? And I want to go over this. So let me just do that. Let's pause this guy, and it was this comment right here. Okay, so let me turn on, this is actually on my last stream, which was from last week. And let me turn on my, let's see, give me 1 second, guys. Let me turn on my monitor. Left monitor, wrong one, right monitor. All right. And let me just make this a little bigger so you guys can read it. So, this is the comment that I want to talk about right here, right? And, so 1911 is one of my viewers that comes on all the time. He's on a lot of my streams, and, me and him don't really see eye to eye on a lot of stuff, but, he's a good enough guy, and I want to talk about this comment here specifically, right? Why conservatives like Trump. So, I sort of went through these a little bit, Why conservatives like Trump. Trump hasn't really touched guns and are not going after guns, right? Yeah, that's true. I don't really have any comment on that. I know that, guns are a very big motivating issue with a lot of conservatives. It seems like it's either guns or abortion are the things that conservatives care about the most. Right. So, got nothing to say about that. Second one, Trump has deregulated a lot of things, and conservatives typically don't like big government. Well, I want to ask you why. Why is that such a big deal? Right? Why would you care specifically that Trump has deregulated a lot of things? Because if you look at the shit that Trump actually has deregulated, a lot of it doesn't really affect your life at all. Okay, some of it does. They did a deregulation about the entry of generic drugs into the country, right? That I could see has a positive effect on some people's lives, but it may not work out the way you want, right? So one of the things that like libertarians, for example, will say about regulations, like they'll say shit like, well, it's put there by the government in order to control access to the market for certain companies, right? And an example of that is generic drugs, right? You're not allowed to get generic drugs in the country here, and a lot of people think that the FDA is harder on generic drugs so that it prevents, like, generic drug companies from selling generic drugs here, which drives down the price of drugs, right? And they think it's being done as a way to protect the drug companies. And it's like, okay, yeah, in some respects, maybe, right? Another reason, though, is that the FDA, the FDA has a very long approval process for generic drugs for that reason, right? Another reason for that, though, is that, well, a lot of generic drugs are manufactured offshore in places like, India and Mexico, right? Places that don't really have the same kind of quality controls that you have in the United States, right? And there's a big problem in those countries with generic drugs that don't actually do what they say on the label, right? And because they don't have the same types of, inspections, they don't have the same types of controls on things. And so you think you're getting your, cancer medication, and in real life you're just getting some Smarties that have been like, right? You're getting aspirin or some shit. That happens all the time. That happens all the time in India and Mexico and China, stuff like that. Right. So that's one reason why the FDA is a little stricter when it comes to those types of things, right? I'm all for this. I'm all for deregulating this as long as we can guarantee that, the drugs that are imported are of the same quality as the stuff you would buy in the United States, right? And I'm all for it. So yeah, let's go ahead, do it, man. I'm all for that. Next one, but there are other things that he's deregulated, right? Like a lot of environmental, regulations don't affect anybody's life at all unless you happen to live out in the wilderness or some shit like that. So, for example, he's removed limits on carbon dioxide from power plants and cars. Why would you care about that if you're a conservative? Why do you care that, a regulation saying a power plant can't dump this much pollution has been removed? How does that make you happy? Doesn't really seem to make sense to me. You would think that that would be a bad thing, right? Like, you'd think that, okay, well, now Trump has made it so that people can pollute more? Why is that? Why do you like him for that? You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Or another one, they removed protections on wetlands. Okay, so if you don't know a wetland, the wetlands protection, right? Let's turn this monitor off. Wetlands basically prevent flooding from hurricanes in coastal cities, right? So one reason why New Orleans gets hit by hurricanes so hard is because they've removed all the wetlands that are around there. So used to be like there were a couple of 10 or 15 miles of wetlands around New Orleans, and when a hurricane would hit, that would absorb all that. It's a place for the water to drain to, essentially, right? And now that's Katrina shows up and New Orleans fucking like ends up underwater because all the wetlands have been drained and they've built houses there, shit like that. It's like, why would you care about that? Like, why does that make you happy to know that Trump removed protections for that so they can go bulldoze all that shit? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? Let's see. Here's another one. When it comes to another regulation that got removed, and we're talking a lot about healthcare during this stream. There was a regulation in 2016 that was put in to stop junk health insurance. Donald Trump removed that as part of the tax bill in 2017. So the prohibition against junk insurance plans, right? What does that mean? Well, used to be, right, you could sell insurance that was insurance in name only, right? So part of the ACA was to get rid of that junk insurance plans that didn't actually cover you. So you would get insurance, you'd pay them all this money, right? And then when you would actually get sick, you get in a car accident or something, insurance would come back and be like, oh, well, we don't actually cover that. We only cover, this, and this. 2 checkups a day, a year, and like free Band-Aids. Right? And then you'd be like out on your own. So you would end up paying, and that's why they would be really cheap. They'd be really cheap because the plans would be worthless, right? People often talk about how like, oh shit, didn't mean to do that. People would often talking about like, well, why do I need insurance for stuff I'm never going to use, right? Well, it's sort of like, you don't know that the whole point of having health insurance is because you don't know when you're going to need it. Even if you do, work out every single day and you're healthy, right? And you don't eat sugar and you don't have to worry about developing diabetes or whatever. You could wake up tomorrow and, rub your eyes in the morning and your fucking retinas could detach from your eyes and you could be blind. That's something that could happen to you tomorrow. That's why, your mom says don't rub your eyes and shit too much. That's why, because you could be rubbing your eyes and it fucking could result in you going blind. That's not bullshit. I'm not making that up. Right? How do you prepare for something like that? You could go get surgery, have your retinas reattached or whatever, right? Well, you can't do that shit if you don't have health insurance, right? Well, before the ACA, you would go try to get health insurance and nope, blindness is a pre-existing condition. So guess what? They're not going to sell you insurance, right? That's the reason why you have insurance. Insurance is there to insure you so that when shit goes wrong, you don't have to worry about, being fucking left with your dick hanging in the wind. And you'll be okay, right? That's the whole point of having it. It's a just in case this happens. So, if you just buy insurance for just just having a piece of paper that doesn't fucking do anything for you, what's the point, right? Well, that's what this regulation was, right? Donald Trump got rid of that. So now people can go buy cheap insurance again that when shit hits the fan, it's not going to do anything for them. Like, why are you happy about? Why would anybody be happy about that? Why would you like Donald Trump? Donald Trump is enabling health insurance companies to be able to rip you off again. Why would you like him for that? I don't understand that shit. Anyway, so yeah, not all regulations are bad. In fact, a lot of regulations are very good. And it's the shitty regulations. It's like, okay, get rid of the crappy ones. Get rid of the ones that actually fuck people up. Hold them back, It's not just the fact, like, they seem like they like him just because the idea that he's removing regulations at all. It's like, well, no, man, you gotta think about what's actually fucking happening. Not, I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. This one we're going to talk a lot about here, man. Trump has also done fine with Corona. Let me just highlight this so we know what I'm talking about. Trump has also done fine with Corona given it was already in the country and there really isn't anything to be done given the ridiculous increased state Corona measures in liberal states that would claim a mass decrease in cases and deaths when that isn't seen and the illness is quite still common even according to them. Trump up until coronavirus had a strong economy. No, that's not true, dude. Trump has not done well with Corona at all. Right? Oh, wait, I didn't have my monitor turned on. Let me turn it on again. Just so this is the one I'm responding to here. Trump has also done fine with Corona. No, that's not true. The response to the pandemic is abysmal. Absolutely. In fact, you know what? We're going to search. Let's go up here. Let's go to Google. And let's search for coronavirus deaths. See, I've searched for it so many times, it's just saved in my thing here. And we're looking at, this is just for California, total cases. 282,000 deaths. Since yesterday, 2,190 since yesterday. Total cases in the United States, 14.8 million. Right. Plus 206,000 cases since yesterday. All right. This is the number of deaths, right? That's the number of deaths that happened yesterday. That's the number of deaths that happened like today. Let's go to cases. New cases. This is the number of new cases that happened just in a day. All right. On what planet is this, handling it well? Right? That's not handling it well at all. Let's look at coronavirus deaths, right? New Zealand. Look at that. See that? This is the daily change. Oh, 2 people died in September. Another person died on September 16th. Look at this. 0. All right. 25 people have died in New Zealand. All right. Look at that. All right, see? New Zealand, cases, 2,000 cases, 25 deaths. United States, 14.8 million cases, 282,000 deaths. What's wrong with this picture? What is wrong with this fucking picture? All right. So, no, man. No. He has not done well with Corona. He's not done fine with Corona. He's done abysmally with the pandemic. He fucked this up as bad as anybody could fuck it up. The worst in the fucking world. Okay. With the possible exception of China. I mean, because we don't really know the numbers out of China, right? They probably had more than 282,000 deaths in China. We don't really know. Worse than India, worse than Iran. I mean, ridiculous. So, sorry, that's complete bullshit. Moving on. Trump until coronavirus had a strong economy. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. The economy was a paper tiger, you know. The economy was already fucked up even before the pandemic, you know. Most people in the country could not afford an unexpected bill of $400, right, before the pandemic, even more so now. So how is that a measure of a successful economy when most people don't have $400 in the bank? How is that? How is that a successful economy, right? Just not, you know, most people, you know, there was an average before the pandemic, an average of $11,000 in credit card debt in this country per person, an average of $60,000 in student loan debt, right, per person in the country. You know, less than half of the people in the country are actually employed, even before the pandemic. Of course, that's counting things like, you know, retired people and children and stuff like that, and housewives. But still, you know, what's that, 150 million people who don't work in the country? I mean, you know, and even now, and now the pandemic has just made it like 100 times fucking worse, you know, so no, before, you know, before COVID, the economy was fucking screwed, right? And this is not even like considering things like, you know, the shit that's going to hit the economy in the next 20 years, you know, stuff like the automation epidemic that's going to put millions of people out of work, you know. And it's not just stuff like factory jobs and shit like that, you know. Self-driving cars, self-driving vehicles are going to put millions of people out of work. Okay. You know, AI is going to put millions of people out of work, right? They're already developing shit that, you know, when you call like a fucking, you know, helpline, the person on the other end is an AI and it sounds like a real person and you just can't fucking tell. That's already coming, you know. Expect within the next 20 years, every time you call someplace to get help, it's going to be a robot that you're talking to. That's coming, right? You know, expect within 20 years, every McDonald's you go into is not going to have a real person behind the counter. It's all just going to be you selecting shit from a menu and then a robot making it in the back. That's coming, right? Expect every delivery you make is going to be made by a fucking, like, robot car. That's coming, right? You know, what's going to happen when you can't get a job even delivering pizzas anymore? You know, 20 years, that'll be the round, right? You know, just watch, dude. You know, you think that's all science fiction. Yeah, well, cell phones were science fiction 20 years ago, weren't they? Right? You know, fucking, you know, look at video game consoles nowadays and compare them to shit that came out in 1995, right? 25 years ago. I mean, come on, right? This is where the technology is going. This shit's all going to happen. We're not doing anything to even try to head that stuff off at the pass. We're not doing anything to try to retrain people, right? You know, we're going to need stuff like, you know, in order to address this, right? We're going to need stuff like fucking, oh, wait a minute. Shit, am I still streaming? I hope I'm streaming. Wait a minute. Yes, okay, good. All right, great. You know, we're going to need stuff like job training in order to, like, you know, we're going to need job training. We're going to need lots of investment in the economy. We're going to need fucking some forms of universal basic income to even stay where we're at today with this, you know, to even keep the economy where it is right now. So, no, the economy was not good. The economy's not going to be good, right? It's not looking good for a lot of people. Let's go on. Let's move on. Trump increased the deficit in order to deal with the coronavirus at a recommendation of his advisors as well as people across the aisle. Definitely wasn't his first choice, and ironically, the host The host wants him to spend more for a second wave of corona checks. So I think you may be misinformed here, man, because, you know, let me just kind of put this over here. The deficit was way up even before Trump took over. Right? So this here is, let me just sort of make this a little smaller so I can see, so you guys can see what we're doing here. Wrong one. That one. There we go. Can I make that smaller? Can I, like, zoom in a little bit on that? Okay, there we go. This is the deficit, you know, the United States deficit, budget deficit, which has doubled more than 2015, right? This comes from the Treasury Department and the Office of Management and Budget. So you notice this is where Trump takes over, right? Here's where it is in 2007. Deficit was kind of small, right? Obama hits, bam. What happens during Obama, right? Why was it so high in 2009, right? It was because of the financial crisis, right? The financial market's collapsing, and the government has to spend a shitload of money in order to prop up fucking the financial sector, right? Then it starts, you know, so that's what happens here. Starts going down slowly over the Obama years, gets all the way back to where it was, you know, roughly a little under 500 billion. In fact, if you look, this is actually smaller than that. It was actually less than where it was in 2008, right? Jumps up a little in 2016. If you remember what was going on at this time, shit like the fiscal cliff and the sequester and all that bullshit, right? Trump takes over, bam, shoots way up. 2018, why did it increase? Why did it increase in 2018, right? There was no pandemic in 2018. 2019, it goes up even more. There was no pandemic in 2019. Pandemic didn't start till 2020. So why did it increase? Why did it go up to $1 trillion from where it was once Trump took office? What happened? Well, Trump's tax cuts. Right? That's what happened. That's why the deficit went up. Okay. It had nothing to do with the pandemic or Trump's response to the pandemic, right? It went up because Republicans cut taxes and they didn't cut spending. Okay. So here's another one, and just to kind of show you that this is not unique to Donald Trump, right? This is U.S. budget deficit by year. Right, let's make this a little bigger for you guys, right? U.S. budget deficit by year, 1981 to 2019. So if you notice, this, you know, 1981 is when Reagan takes over, deficits increase, right? Go down a little bit at the end of the Reagan years. They increase a lot during the Bush 1 years, right? Clinton takes over, those deficits go away. Right? When Clinton is there, oh, we have a surplus. Okay. So it's like, increasing during a Republican, decreasing during a Democrat. Bush second comes over, deficit goes way down again. Why? You know? Spikes way up, 2008. Really shoots up here. Financial crisis. Starts going down again. Why is it going down? Oh, wait, Republican. Oh, it goes back up. Why do deficits go up during Republican administrations and down during Democratic administrations? Because of tax cuts. Okay. Ronald Reagan cuts taxes, deficit goes way up. Bill Clinton raises taxes, deficits go down. Bush cuts taxes again, deficits go way down. Obama barely raises taxes, deficits go down again. Trump takes over, cuts taxes, deficits go way up. That's exactly what fucking happened. So that's why, you know, I mean, it had nothing to do with his pandemic response at all, in the slightest whatsoever. I'm sorry to, you know, break it to you there, man. And I don't mean to be a dick about it, but that's the actual truth. Okay. Let's see. What else were we talking about? Let's go back to, we're almost done here. Okay. Another one that my answer, let's see, let's turn on my monitor again. And of course, I got to make this smaller now because I increased the size of it and all that shit. Okay, here we go. One more. Trump decreased taxes on me as I have seen more money in my pocket compared to under Obama. Yes, I have more money in my pocket too. But something you got to keep in mind is that tax cut in 2017 is a double-edged sword, right? So yeah, they did do things in 2017. They did increase the standard deduction. They doubled it. That's why you're seeing more money on your tax return, right? They doubled the standard deduction, right? They also took away a lot of deductions that you would usually take. Things like interest on your house or whatever, right? The thing is that in 2024, that goes back to how it was, right? And the deductions are still missing. So the standard deduction is going to disappear in 2024, but the other deductions that you used to take will not revert, right? Which is funny because the taxes they cut for corporations are permanent. So the corporate tax cut in 2017 is permanent. The individual tax cuts that we all got go away in 2024, which would have been at the end of Trump's second term. So keep that in mind. So they basically temporarily cut taxes for them to shoot back up again when they thought Trump wouldn't be in office. Why did they do that? So that they could blame it on whatever Democrat was coming next. That's why. So they could pressure whatever Democrat was going to get elected in 2024 in order to, so they could say, oh, he's raising taxes. That's why they did it like that. Okay. But so there you go. So I just want to let you know, it's like, yeah, okay, we're getting a tax cut. We're getting a tax cut which is increasing the deficit, as I just showed. Right. But it's only temporary. It's only temporary, and the permanent ones are going to their corporations. So yeah, you're sort of kind of benefiting, in the short term, at the sacrifice of the long term, health of the United States. So I guess save your money while you can. It's a little too late now. We can't do anything about it until 2024 comes around anyway. But you have your money now, you better save it because you're gonna fucking need it. Because when you retire, the company, the country's not gonna have any cash to fucking help you out. So there you go. Okay, let's see. Trump got rid of the mandate for health care as I don't have to pay $600 per year in order to have no coverage due to me not qualifying for Obamacare. Well, I don't know how much money you make. There's a window in the ACA where if you make too much money, then you don't get the subsidies. So you must make too much money in order to get that, right? But, the whole point of having healthcare, like I said before, is in order to keep you, in case some shit happens to you that you're going to need it. So yeah, you don't need it now, right? Healthcare, you don't have to pay for shit that you don't need, right? You may need it tomorrow. You might not know. You might get in a car accident. You might wake up with a tumor that you didn't notice before. Okay. You might catch fucking COVID-19. Okay. A lot of shit could happen to you, and that's the whole point of having insurance, is to make sure that when it happens, you can go to the doctor and you don't have to take out a fucking second mortgage in order to pay for it. Right? Well, that's the whole point of having the mandate there, right, was in order to subsidize the health insurance industry. Okay. Remember, this is the Republican conservative healthcare plan that we're talking about. Okay. The ACA is the conservative plan. All right. This is the plan put forward by the Heritage Foundation. This was Romney Care, right? So if you have a problem with the way the ACA works, talk to those guys. Talk to the Republicans. Talk to the fucking, Heritage Foundation, right? Because we're living under the plan that they wanted. We're living on, this is the plan we have, is the conservative plan, right? The liberal plan, the Democratic plan, right, would be Medicare for all. The shit that Bernie Sanders wants, right, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants. Oh, wow, that's all fucked up. Let me just move that. The things that they want is Medicare for all, which would be it comes out of your taxes, right? You pay it out of your taxes, and then you go to the doctor, right? And whatever shit, it's covered already, and you don't have to worry about any of this qualifying bullshit. That's what it's like in every other country on earth, okay? And I don't think we need to emphasize that shit, okay? If you get sick in Britain, right, you go to the doctor, that's it, bam, it's paid for, the end, and then you pay for it out of your taxes. If you get sick in Canada, you break your arm in Canada, you just go to the doctor. You don't have to worry about insurance cards, you don't have to, like, is this in my fucking, this doctor inside of my, network? Am I going to have to pay double because it's outside of network? You don't have to worry about any of that bullshit. And it's taken out of your taxes. And yeah, your taxes are higher. Yes, they are. They're higher, okay? But this is what you get for it, right? This is another problem that conservatives have when it comes to taxes. It's like high taxes are not necessarily a bad thing when you get stuff that actually helps people, right? So what? So what? Your taxes are an extra $200 a year. Or even, let's say, an extra $500 a year. Okay, so let's say you get $1,500 back on your, or let's say, or even something like, well, actually, last year, I got a shitload of money last year. I don't mean to brag, but last year, because we bought an electric car, and California gave us $7,000 just for that electric car, So I got back, like, last year, like, a shitload of money. Like, it was, like, fucking a lot. I got, like, $11,000 back last year because of that car. I only would have got, like, $3,000. Anyway, so, yeah, there you go. Like, let's say you're getting $3,000 back on average from your, income tax return, right? And instead of that, you get $2,500 back. It's like, okay, yeah, that's $500, big deal. But the trade-off is you can go to the doctor anytime you want and not have to pay for it. That sounds like a pretty good fucking trade-off to me. Okay, I don't see the problem, And yeah, so what? What's the argument there is like, okay, well, some people who aren't paying enough into the insurance, then they get to take advantage of it, and I'm paying for people who aren't paying for their... Who cares? Who cares if... So what some people don't pay enough into it? Who gives a fuck, alright? We should be treating everybody in the country the best we can. So what if somebody ends up, taking more than they're putting in? That's the, caring about people is like, that's what a decent, ordinary human beings do, right? And if it means that, okay, so some guy who can't work, right, is getting more of a dollar amount in care than he's, like, putting in through his taxes, I don't care. I really don't give a shit about that. And that's what it should be there for. It should be there for to help people who can't pay for themselves, to actually get healthcare so that they don't go fucking bankrupt or they don't die from shit that's easily treatable. Like, I just don't understand, like, I don't understand, like, how this is, like, how anybody can look at this from a moral perspective and think we're doing the right thing here by, like, denying people fucking healthcare because they can't afford it. I don't understand that shit. One last thing, and then I think we'll end this. One last thing here that you left. Your last comment, 1911. Trump has caught illegal aliens. For reference, any criminal is separated from their children. Illegal aliens are no different. Yeah. So, right monitor. Trump has definitely deported a lot of people. But the number of actual people who have been deported is not really that much different than what was being done under the Obama years. Um, as a matter of fact, it's actually, according to Pew Research, right, the number of actual deportations is less than what we had under Obama. Now, it's a little bit different, all right? The number of actual apprehensions at the border has gone up. That's for sure, right? So, Border Patrol has definitely, increased, catching more people, right? The number of ICE arrests is actually lower than when Obama was in office. So the number of people being arrested in the country by ICE is lower, right? And removals of unauthorized immigrants, right, is still lower than it was during the Obama years. So that was highest in 2012 with 432,000, and right now it's at around 337,000, so it's still lower. So we're Trump is still, through his 4 years, still actually deported less people. Removals of unauthorized immigrants, right? He actually deported less people than Obama did. Okay, so I'm getting all this from, this is from the Pew Research Center, right? So I'll put this in the chat too, so you guys can, see this if you. Let me just go back to the live stream, put that in the chat, right? So yeah, that's a misconception. Now, what is happening though is that it's not the people you deport. Like if you care about illegal immigration, right? Undocumented immigrants, right? If you care about that, if you think that's a big problem in the country, which I don't think it is, myself personally. I don't really give a shit about, unauthorized, immigrants or whatever. Illegal aliens, whatever you call it. Not a problem to me, right? But if you care about it, you got to think about, well, it's not so much the people, how many people are being deported. It's really who are the actual people who are being deported, right? During the Obama years, they concentrated on criminals. So they would concentrate on gang members, MS-13, right? Stuff like that, right? They would go after, and normally if you were just a normal person that, you were undocumented, but you weren't, disobeying any laws or whatever, then you would just go through the normal process, right? You would probably get caught. You'd probably have to, go to court a couple times, and then you'd get, appeals and all this other shit, blah, 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 blah. And then they had things like DACA, deferred action for students, that kind of thing, where if you were a student and you were, brought over to this country as a small child, right, and you were a student, then they would basically allow you to stay in the country to go to school. And there was a lot of debate about creating a pathway to citizenship and shit like that, right? What has happened, and what that did was that, so really it was only things like gang members, human traffickers, or if any of these people actually did commit a crime, if they lied or stole something, or lied about their tried to come up with phony documents or something, shit like that. That's who they focused on. That's who they deported during the Obama years, right? In the Trump years, they've kind of thrown all that out the window, and they just went after the law-abiding people, right? The people that are the actual students, the people that were going to school here, who were brought over as children, who have lived basically their entire lives in the United States and have no ties to whatever other country they came from. Those are the people that started getting deported, and you started seeing shit like this. So here's an example, of some of the people that ICE has concentrated on under, Trump, right? Tuscan high school student arrested by Border Patrol, right? Who was released. So who's this guy? He's an 18-year-old kid who in Arizona, who was arrested 2 weeks before graduating high school. Right. I'll put this in the bottom here. There was a fight over this guy, trying to get him released and shit. Right. So you can read about that if you want. Right. Here's another one. Oh, fuck you. No, go away. Pillar of the community. Business owner deported after nearly 40 years under Trump's immigration policy. Here's a guy. This guy actually was from Jordan, who was in the United States 40 years, right? Business owner. He employs people. He's got a family here, married to an American citizen. All of his children are American citizens, right? Not a criminal, not a drug dealer, not a human trafficker. Donald Trump deports this guy. Okay? So here's another one. I'll put this also in the, put that down there too. So you guys can see this, right? And so there you go, folks. It's not about just kicking people out. Because there's this misconception on the right that illegal aliens come here and they steal your jobs. They steal your jobs. And they get on welfare. And they're just sucking up your tax dollars. And then they vote for Hillary Clinton and shit. Right? This misconception that, illegal aliens are illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, right? I don't really like the term illegal aliens. I like undocumented immigrants. This idea that they come here and the whole reason they're here is just to suck off the government teat and to get all of our precious welfare dollars and all that shit. When in real life, there is no government teat, right? These people can't get any help. They're not citizens, so they're not eligible for welfare. Right? They're not eligible for unemployment. They're not eligible for Medicare. They're not eligible for anything because they're not citizens, right? So, you don't get any of this shit if you're not a citizen. You don't get any federal dollars. You don't get any state dollars. Nothing like that. You don't get grants to go to school. You don't get anything. You can join the military, strangely enough. I don't know how that shit works, but apparently you can join the military if you're not a citizen. And there's stories about ICE under Trump deporting people who are in the military. That's not bullshit. I'm not making that up. Donald Trump deporting people in the military. That seems fucking wrong, too. Seems to me that if you decided to volunteer for the United States military, then that should guarantee citizenship. If you can get into the military, if you're willing to go fight and die for this country, then at the very least, you should be a citizen. I don't understand that shit. That's something that needs to fucking change. So, yeah, man, I don't understand, why? Why does that matter so much? Why do they love Trump so much? Because he's going after students and business owners, and then in real life, he's actually deported less people than the guy before him that they fucking hate so much. I don't understand this shit. It doesn't make any sense to me, man. So, and like I said before, this is, at the beginning of the stream, this is the result of an uninformed populace who have spent the last 30 years being brainwashed by a right-wing media machine. The reason why these misconceptions like this get out there, once again, it's because fucking, people like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson make money telling lies that fucking convince people. Well, now, the lies, the crazy people are running the fucking asylum now. Right? So, maybe, I don't know, maybe Fox News might be a little more motivated to curtail some of the bullshit. Now that they see that their base fucking, their base customers are, fucking jumping ship and going to the crazy, even more crazy people. Maybe we might start seeing some moderate Republicans again. The ones that stick around and actually still keep watching Fox might be less crazy in the next coming years. I don't know. One can only fucking hope, right? I don't know. Anyway, folks. Shit. It's almost 3 hours. I think we need to end this. this is what we got so far. I'm just literally doodling here. This is nothing. I'm not even. I don't even know what this will be. This is just some weird monster stuff. Didn't really get a lot accomplished in 3 hours, huh? I don't know. But then again, I spent a good majority of the stream actually talking and not drawing. So, let's go ahead and get going on this, ending this up. Thank you, everybody, for joining still. Thank you, 1911, for joining. I hope that you don't think I'm picking on you. I don't mean to pick on you, but, you know, I appreciate you letting me use you as a soundboard in order to give the progressive liberal side of these issues. I appreciate it. Next one, Lewis the Hedgehog, thank you for joining. I know I didn't get to any of your comments, but thanks for joining, dude. Thank you, Timothy Danhofer, and thank you, Cephas, thank you so much. And everybody else who joined today, thank you, Booyah, Amadon, and anyone else. You guys are great. If you like me and you like what I do, please like and subscribe. I hate having to say that, but unfortunately it works. All you got to do is say like and subscribe, and then people fucking like and subscribe. So thank you so much. If you like what I do, also please consider following me on social media. I have a DeviantArt site. Let me just go ahead and show that to you here. This is my DeviantArt site. If you like what I do, I have a lot of artwork on here and stuff, you know, comics and shit like that. So come check me out there. What is this? Nope. Fuck you. Thank you. And if you want to support the channel, I have an SD shop where I sell prints. So, and I also sell things like this. This is like a sculpture that I did from a Halloween pumpkin with like lots of weird eyeballs and stuff like that. And then here's like a print that I did. This is a Kraken, you know, these are coffee stained prints that I make that each one comes out unique. So these are very popular. And if you like what I do and you want to support me, please consider going to my SD shop and buying something. I'll put a link in the bottom of the thing after the stream publishes. And then I also have a webcomic at wanja.com. So if you like my artwork and you want to see more of it, here's my webcomic. It's got ninjas, it's got monsters, it's got, you know, ninjas fighting monsters, magic and shit like that. So that's my webcomic. And then also I have another YouTube channel. So if you want to see me do some non-political content, if you want to see me talking about toys and video games and movies and stuff, please check me out on UCD Videos, which is my other non-political YouTube channel where I talk about pop culture crap. So thank you guys so much for all joining. I really appreciate it. And once again, also thank you 9/11 for letting me sound off and you know, sound off and express the liberal you know, progressive side against your comments there. You know, appreciate that. And you guys are cool, and I will most likely do another one of these in the middle of the week. So thank you, and I am out of here. Adios.